Alright, so with the release of Rage of the Abyss, I think many players were scared of being priced out of the format, and justifiably so. But we've had this format for about a month now, and something surprising happened. There are many players doing really well and seeing success with different inexpensive decks, and that's what we're going to be focusing on in today's video. We're gonna go over 5 budget decks, their price, and discuss what actually makes them relevant and a great meta choice for Rota format. I'm super excited to get into today's video because I want you guys to be aware of the fact that you don't need to have all of the most expensive cards to compete and see success. So before jumping into the video, I just want to quickly remind you, if you like the video, make sure you like it and comment. It really helps the channel. And yeah, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first deck I want to discuss is Tempai, actually. And before you say something and jump to conclusions, you do not have to play Mulcharmi cards in Tempai. A Tempai player actually topped YCS Guayaquil without Fuvalos, and the reason being, and that goes for any deck that could potentially run Mulcharmis, a lot of players are going to be playing around it, they're going to be playing outs for it, and they're going to have a specific game plan to combat that card. And when you go into a field of people being completely prepared for something like that, they will not be able to play around everything else. And by everything else, I mean inexpensive negation cards like Veiler, perhaps Mourner, Droll, I think is a really good card for today's format, Ogre, stuff like that. And there are actually a lot of topping deck profiles that are not running Fuvalos, and a lot of players are going to tell you that. And I myself have found that I don't actually win games with Fuvalos that much. Like, it happens here and there, but it doesn't happen all the time. And Tempai, I think, is a great choice because you can build it, specifically for this format, very hand trap heavy. In my opinion, I think this is the best approach right now, and we've been doing a lot of testing and discussing. Shout out James, he is my coach and he is great. He taught me a lot when it comes to this deck. You can build it specifically for this format. You don't have to be afraid of losing a matchup because they send you first or you have too many going second cards. There are versions with Raigeki and Dark Hole and Droplet and stuff like that, but I personally don't think that's the way to go. I think you have to play a lot of hand traps. Of course, Shifter is a very inexpensive card, and overall your engine is great at going second anyway. So Tempai is an amazing choice right now if you really build it mindfully, and you don't need Mulcharmi to compete. I swear. Now, before we get into the other decks, I want to talk about SP, and I want to bring your attention to this. So this is SP. Right now, if you search on TCG Player, there are a lot of inexpensive copies of SP, and I know that is historic for our game because SP was an incredibly expensive card that was kind of pricing people out of the format, let's be real. And right now you can get accessible copies of it, which is incredible because it's a mandatory extra deck monster in almost every single deck, in my opinion. So yes, please spend those $5 to $6, invest into an SP, and I think you're going to have a very meta-relevant deck just by using this card in the extra deck. Or perhaps going IP into SP or some combos like that. Now, let us move on to the next deck, which I'm actually most excited about in today's video. It's gonna be Mermail. Look, I know some cards are expensive. We're going to pull those up. But other than that, Mermail was reprinted for the most part, and I do mean Mermail, Atlantean, Abyss, the entire deck. So it was reprinted in the Bonanza set, most of it anyway. However, there are a couple cards that are still a little more expensive, but if you take everything into consideration, you are still going to be at around $100 mark, something like that, if you invest into the entire core, because most of your deck is actually engine. Like, you play a lot of Mermail Atlantean cards. There's Mermail Abyss Spike. This one, a lot of players are playing it at 3 because of Spirit, which is a new support card. So the Atlantean Spirit is able to special summon a fish monster from your deck, and then that fish monster actually gets you to Abyss Spike. However, some players are cutting it because it is not essential. meaning you don't need to play 3 copies of a card that's almost $30. You can play just one of it, and Jesse Cotton actually has a great list on his channel where he plays only one of the Abyss Spike and kind of has a different approach for the entire deck, so you don't need to spend that much. Let's talk about another card. Heavy Infantry is a super important card for this list, and some players are even opting to play 2 to 3 copies, but it is about $11. So that's another card you're going to have to be investing into. And then there's also the Atlantean Spirit that actually pushes this deck forward. Not to mention there's a new Link, which is completely busted. It's really, really, really good. And this secret rare is about like $4 or something like that. Other than that, we do have Murmela Biscayos. This card is expensive, to say the least. But since everything was reprinted in Bonanza anyway, and you have to invest into some other cards, if you throw this into the equation as well, you should still be fine. I think a budget deck should be defined for a deck that's about $100 to $150 for the entire core, and then the non-engine that you can play, you can just decide what you want to run, what you have access to. Now, this card is important. You do have a lot of rank 7 plays, but it's about $50. So do with that information what you will. You can invest into it, or maybe you've had it from before because this deck was relevant like 10 years ago or something like that, about 10 years ago. Now, what makes Mermail actually that great is the fact that it can play through hand traps very easily, because if you don't know how the deck functions, mainly you want to have your Mermail, your Atlantean cards being sent to the graveyard for cost. So it doesn't matter if something like a Neptabis Prince gets negated, which is like the most broken card in your deck. It is so good. I cannot stress enough how great that card is, but it sends to graveyard for cost. So if you get Veilered or something, it doesn't really matter because you send for cost anyway, and then your Dragoons or whatever you send for cost is going to trigger. Going second, you don't have a hard time actually, because you're playing a lot of cards that are just good at going second, like Infantry, like Abyss Megalo, like all of your cards pretty much pushing through disruption because of everything being sent for cost, triggering and getting you additional effects. The deck can also play Dominus Impulse, but you don't need to play it if you don't want to, or if you don't have financial access to it, which is totally fair. In my opinion, this deck is definitely an underdog. I don't think a lot of players are actually gravitating towards it. Some of the pros, maybe, because it's super hard to pilot and doesn't have a lot of established combos. But that's great for you if you actually decide to master the deck. And if you invest into it because of all of the reprints, you're gonna have a deck that is not threatened by the ban list at all, plays through hand traps very easily, can still play a lot of hand traps, and has a good going second approach as well. So I think the Mermail Atlantean Abyss deck is a great choice right now, and I would suggest you look into it. Let's move on. I want to talk about Memento. Now, I think Memento is very similar to Mermail. It has a couple expensive cards, but in my opinion, this deck is on the way to becoming a super meta relevant deck. But we do need a ban list that kind of tones down the power of Snake Eyes and some of these broken combo decks like Yubel or something, which is still a relevant deck, even though it kind of loses to Favalas. But I'm pretty sure a ban list is going to tone down the power level of decks. If we're judging by the OCG, that's pretty much what's going to happen. And in a field like that, I think a great combo deck could be Memento, Mermail as well. So Memento pretty much, again, very similarly to Mermail, plays through hand traps very, very easily, but it does have a problem with Shifter. So perhaps if Shifter gets banned, overall if Tempai gets addressed in some way, and we don't see as much Shifter in the meta, this deck could be great, but we do have to keep in mind that some of the decks coming out of new sets can play Shifter and are going to be really broken with that. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to see what a ban list brings, but I do think Memento is a great great choice. The end boards are actually like super hard to crack, and it has a lot of extenders to let you play through your opponent's disruption. You do have some cards that are a little more expensive. The Andwich is about $12 and the Bone Party is 17, and you do need 3 copies of all of that. But in my opinion, if you invest into this deck, you're going to be playing it for like a year. I'm 100% certain this is a deck that you can invest into right now and play it for a really, really long time. And that's why I think it's a great choice. There's also the combined creation, which there's just weird stuff happening with this card because there's a lack of it on TCG Player, but it's not actually that expensive. Like it's about $10. But since there's no available, people are listing it for like 40, which is outrageous. So just ignore that. But yeah, it's a great card. You only have to play 1 copy, so I'm sure you're going to find it somewhere. But let us move on to another deck, which also, I have to talk about ShadowRabbit as well. It can be part of the pure Memento deck, which the deck can be played with Fiendsmith, but it doesn't have to be. So that brings down the price significantly. You do have to invest into ShadowRabbit, but if you have it from before, because it is a staple in the extra deck, I think that's great. So about $20 for the rabbit as well. Now let's talk about Voiceless Voice. I want to quickly cover this deck because the only expensive card is actually Law. Other than that, everything is super inexpensive, as you can see right here. And I do think this deck is cool because it doesn't lose to the Charmies, because it has a much different play style and just approach overall. So if you're into ritual decks, I think Voiceless is just going to be quite a relevant deck, like always. It's not going to get hit because it's not that broken, but it is nice and it is seeing occasional tops. And Diviner is about $6, $5 to $6, which is fine for what Diviner used to be. I think that's actually great. And as for the last deck, I want to talk about Labyrinth. I always talk about Labyrinth when I mention inexpensive decks because everything is inexpensive when it comes to Labyrinth. And I do think it's a good meta call because it has a great matchup into some of the meta decks. And you can also build it in many different ways. You can go for the, math approach with the trap card. You can go for a heavy lab approach with a lot of lab cards in the engine. A lot of different normal trap cards function great in this environment. Now, you all know by now what Labyrinth does, so I won't spend too much time talking about that deck, but I do think it can be a good choice. And of course, it is very inexpensive. You just have to finish the extra deck, which can be annoying if you play 3 copies of Chaos Angel, which, you can decide for yourself what you want to do. But that's pretty much it. Other than that, you're gonna get this deck for very, very cheap, and you can decide which kinds of non-engine and trap cards you want to be playing. So all in all, I think all of these decks are not just random throwaway cheap rogue decks. They are actually meta relevant. They don't have to run Mulcharmies. I think if you're investing into one of these decks right now, you're gonna be able to get a lot of playtime with them. And that's super important and valuable in my opinion. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to drop your ideas for budget decks in the comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.